Diley, welcome back to Afternoon Briefing. We know cost of living is biting right around the country, but in your neck of the woods, what are some of those primary concerns that you're hearing from your constituents?
Look, the primary concern is obviously the rise in interest rates, the rise in rental increase, as well as the rise in electricity prices in terms of people paying their electricity bills. And for small businesses that are out here with the cost of gas prices as well, a lot of our small business rely on gas to cook, and there are 400 plus restaurants and cafes out here that are very much bearing the cost of increase in energy prices that's impacting them. And of course, that will eventually pass on to the consumers going out there to eat or going, so that's going to impact the community.
So when you're talking about this situation, it seems like something of a perfect storm. There are a multitude of issues coming together, really making life difficult, not only for households, but also for businesses in the electorate of Fowler, like it is in so many other electorates around the country. What are some of the solutions that people have been putting forward and have been discussing with you?
Look, you know what, I suppose that's why I'm really grateful that the Senate Committee on the Cost of Living is currently here in Fowler. I have invited the committee to visit our Fowler Electorate to hear from firsthand from everyday Australians in the business community, in certain sectors, not-for-profit sector, as well as the financial sector, to understand what the impact is of the cost of living for our community in Fowler. And I would dare say that it's what we speak on would be what everyday Australians across Australia are experiencing and feeling at the moment. So they're having the public hearing at this very moment, and we've got, I think, suicide prevention in the public hearing. We've got, I think, youth organisation there as well. So we're hoping to get and I want the committee to hear firsthand from these individuals and organisations in our community. A solution, we would love to have a solution. From my perspective, the government really needs to look at what they can do with the upcoming budget to support communities like Fowler that are really crying out for the government to look at policies, of course, to address the cost of living, which is, as I pointed out, energy prices, electricity prices, rent increases, and the majority of our community out here use cars, petrol-fueled cars, to drive their families to the doctors, the kids to school, to work, and with a lack of public infrastructure out here, in terms of public transport, that means more people rely on cars to drive. So what I would call on the government is to really look at what investment and resources will the government put into a community like Fowler.
You've pointed to the upcoming budget, and no doubt this is a very tricky situation for the government, because on the one hand it is constantly acknowledging how much pain Australians are going through because of the cost of living crisis we're experiencing, but on the other hand also talking about the need for spending restraint, how difficult the budget situation is, and pointing to the amount of debt that are on government books there. Does that strike you with any sense of maybe fear that this could be put in the too hard basket in the budget come May?
Look, obviously I'm not the treasurer, and neither am I an economist, but what I do understand is when it comes to spending, what value does the government put on in terms of spending to assist everyday Australians who are working, the low to middle income, who are working and paying their taxes, but what is coming back to communities like Fowler? Spending wise, if the government can justify spending $368 billion on buildings, 8 submarines in 27 years' time, that's $368 billion. For me, how will that money be spent on health and on education, on public transport, and assisting low income to middle income working Australians? So the government has to then prioritise, revalue, put value on who they want to support, right? Ordinary working Australians across Australia and in communities like Fowler. And where do they put the investment? It is, they are elected to make those decisions. So that's the government's role to come up with a solution that will help everyday Australians.
You have identified that you're not the Treasurer here, but I will ask you a question about policy as to what you would do if you were in his shoes or indeed in the Prime Minister's shoes. Your crossbench colleague Zoe Daniel this week has polled her electorate of Goldstein in Melbourne and found that there is significant support there in either scaling back or scrapping those stage 3 income tax cuts, which are due to come into effect from next year. Clearly, Goldstein is a very different demographic to Fowler, and I think it would be safe to say it is a much more wealthy electorate across the board. Do you think that that is something that sort of idea has merit and would be something that your constituents would be backing?
Well, I actually raised the issue of scrapping the third stage 3 tax cut last year, and I spoke about it in Parliament after my election before the last budget. And I really pushed on the government to make sure that, that's at this point in time, that is something that they should consider scrapping. So it's something that I absolutely will call on the government to scrap. Now, if they think that they can keep that, but then they have to find revenue to actually support low to middle income earners and providing us with relief for those who are currently facing rent increase in mortgage repayments. As you know, we've faced the 10th rate increase, and that flow it will not flow until, I think, in the coming months, in the coming 12 months, we will see the impact of that on many families, mum and dad. So I think that it is something that I have raised much earlier.
Well, Daily, clearly the Western Sydney community is very much in line with many other communities right across the country in trying to deal with these issues, and we'll wait to see what comes out of this committee process. For joining us on Afternoon Briefing this Friday, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for your time, Matthew.